of affordability in terms of cost, security in terms of autarky and fuel diversity, and sustainability in its current sense of low carbon generation. In my view, the least cost power development, which I just showed, would have a trilemma: high on affordability, but low on sustainability and arguably security. On the other hand, a market that unfolds towards meeting the 70% reduction in greenhouse gas emission in power would achieve high sustainability and security, but low affordability. And finally, if we are really lucky, and we would be able to secure LNG at less than $7 per million BTU, and solar and battery are able to generate at less than the cost of coal, then we would have what everybody in this room wants. That will make Viking very happy. So where do we go? I think we should let the market under EPIRA sort itself out in pursuing least cost generation. Already, we see it working with about $15 billion in investment in about 7,500 megawatts of new capacity addition until 2021. Leave well enough alone. A generation mixed policy by way of mandating the market to buy specific fuel types is a straitjacket to be avoided. It does not help reduce waste. It is more likely to increase it. It is clear that coal generation is indispensable in keeping rates low and the supply reliable. Our economy needs to walk on two legs of services and industry. Lower power rates support industrialization. A bigger GDP will make us have more resources to be resilient in dealing with climate change and enable us to lift more people out of poverty to be less vulnerable to climate change. And that ends my presentation. At this point, you can shoot your questions or shoot the presenter.
Thank you very much, Mr. Herrera. We now open the floor for your questions. For documentation purposes, please state your name and affiliation before asking your question. Go ahead, Sir Viking.
Hi, Chris. One of your what ifs is what if solar and batteries prices are reduced more than, but you did not include the Meralco situation did not include solar plus batteries, right?
No. We have not simulated a case where you have overnight generation from solar because of storage.
No, I think because you did not answer that question, suppose the answer is yes. The fact is that coal plants are very long gestation investments, and ratepayers just want to be assured that they don't get to bear standard costs. And so it has to be either the IPP or Meralco who will bear the standard cost, right? That's what the ratepayers want to be assured of. The second point is that 70% NDC of the Philippines doesn't really require the 70% across all sectors because the Climate Commission has actually ranked a set of mitigation measures based on cost effectiveness.
Very good points, Viking. Let me respond to the first item. Should ratepayers be exposed to stranded costs? If suddenly we find ourselves in a situation where there's a lot more solar and gas generation and then there won't be a need for coal generation anymore. In this situation, I think Meralco has been very smart. They have signed contracts which allows them to carve out their contracted capacities, effectively to return it to the generator, and hence will no longer expose the ratepayers to paying for capacity which is no longer needed. The risk is with the generator.
What if the generator says no? I've seen the PSAs, and there is no assurance there in the PSAs that the IPP will always take back or automatically the carved out capacity, either from retail competition or from renewable energy encroachment.
Yeah, we read the same contract probably. We have a different appreciation of the same language. But in my case, the way I have appreciated the language is that Meralco can return it. There's a carved down provision. The carved down provision says Meralco can reduce the contract capacity and return it to the generator. Your second point is about the 70% or so reduction. I agree with you. I put the 70% reduction just to stress everybody's mind that if you want to achieve a 70% reduction, there will be hell to pay for it. So let's be very mindful that cost already we do not know because we haven't defined what's the social cost of carbon in the Philippines. And so we don't have a sense what's the right price to pay for reduction or displacing carbon.
By the way, you used two sets of two numbers for the cost of carbon. In your gas parity table, you used $1.25 per metric ton. But in an earlier comparison, you used $25. And then also back to the gas parity table, you say gas will become competitive as base load with coal if it's less than or equal to $7. In the latest admissions by PowerGen to the Philippine Stock Exchange, their cost of gas is actually already less than 7.
That's the Malampaya gas.
Yeah, Malampaya.
But Malampaya is what you call limited supply only, while supply gas.
Yeah, but also the LNG forecast is also already around that number.
Good. If anyone can bring gas to the Philippines at less than $7 per million BTU, that will be good for the country. And in fact, MGen is also looking at those opportunities of partnering with anyone who can bring gas to the Philippines at less than $7 per million BTU. At the moment, long-term estimates for gas is in the range scale of $11.5 per million BTU. If you look at coal average in the last 10 years, average of about $3 per million BTU. If you look, and the difference between coal and gas is about $13. So you're looking at a last same period average of about $16 per million BTU in gas. However, in the last 5 years, the difference is shrinking. And it's been shrinking at about 20% per annum. That's a very big drop. So, 16% or 20% per annum with a difference of about, say, the number I'm taking of is a difference of about $16 per million BTU. So, 20% per annum, you get 1/2 after 20 years. 72 divided by 20, it's
60% or 20% per annum?
20% per annum, but I'm just using the rule of thumb. 72 divided by 20 is 3.6 years. So, that brings it to 1/2. And another 3.5 years after that, that brings it to 1/4. And another 3.5 years after that, that brings it to 1/8. And another 3.5 years after that, that brings it to 1/6. Here is what I'm driving at. If you look at that number, you will have reduced the $16 difference in about 14 years. 3.5, to about a difference of $2 per million BTU. So if coal stays at $3 per million BTU, and the difference is now just $2 per million BTU, then you have molecules at $5 per million BTU. So now the question is, how much will it cost us to transport and regasify that gas?
How about using the percentage reductions per annum, Chris? I would contend is something like a misleading Zeno's paradox, that because you are reducing the distance by fractions every step, you will never get to that point. But Zeno's paradox is actually not a paradox. There is a solution to that. So don't use the percentage reductions per annum, because that can be very misleading, because there might be a chance that it will be overtaken, the reductions can overtake.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. But still, if you follow my line of argument, then you will need about 14 years to bring down the difference to $2 per million BTU, which is what we need. If you're building from $3 per million BTU plus a difference of $2 per million BTU plus maybe transport and everything else at $2 per million BTU, you're at the $7 per million BTU. Hoping that the difference will drop as fast as 20% per year. That's just my point. So we'll probably get there.
Yes, sir.
My first question is, I'm curious about your numbers when you said that by 2030, coal will have the biggest share, but solar will also have a significant share. Would you care to give some percentage, like how much would be coal and how much would be solar? And my next question is, in your projections, DOE has its own projections, of course, and they are based on, first of all, a high GDP growth rate. Instead of using the low or the medium, they use the high GDP growth rate. Their projections are also based on a new rule for reserves, which is 25% across the board, instead of the older method of 4% for frequency regulation and backing up to 2 of the largest generating units on the grid. And then they also changed the way they calculate the base load from 70% of peak demand to 70% of peak demand plus 70% of the reserve. So, and therefore, and furthermore, they assume that 70% role for base load will be up to 2040. Did you use the same kind of assumption?
No, we didn't. We didn't use a rule which says base load must be 70%, merit must be 20%, because that's effectively also imposing a generation mix.
Correct.
Second, on the numbers, we can take this offline, we can share those numbers with you. The other point is about reserves. I think in the analysis, we already factored in 25 or 25% reserve. So that's more than enough to cover regulating, contingency, and backup reserve.
If I may just add, the 25% reserve, instead of the old 4% plus 2 of the largest plants, if you apply it if you express it in terms of the old figures, it's 4% for frequency regulation plus a backup of about the 12 largest.
Two largest units.
No.
You need, okay. I think I'm familiar with the reserve, ancillary services. You're correct. The requirement for regulating reserve, that's
4%.
enable you to follow the changes in frequency. That's 4% peak. But the way NGCP sets their contingency reserve, it's the largest capacity on dispatch. So presumably here in Luzon, the largest capacity on dispatch will be SWAT, that's 650 megawatts. Then you need, that's contingency. You know, capacity must be running. You can call it anytime, an aggregate of about 650 megawatts at peak. Then you have the third level of reserve, which is the backup reserve. You need to be able to bring in an additional 650 megawatts of reserve. So that calls at any time about, you know, currently there's 10,000 demand in Luzon, so 400 megawatts plus about 1,300, it's about 1,700 megawatts of reserve. I think our forecast will cover this. I even disagree with the way NGCP sets the reserve. It's what we call deterministic approach. This has long been eschewed by the power industry. What people do today is to set reserve on a probabilistic basis. They have a criterion which they say we should set our reserves so that there is a chance of only one day in 1 year not to be able to meet that supply.
That's what NPC used to do.
Exactly. I was about to say that. You read my mind. In the past, in my other life in NPC, that is what we used to do. Set the reserves at a criterion of 1 day per year loss of load probability. In developed countries, it's more stringent. It's 6 days per year, 1 day in 6 years loss of load probability. In the US, it's probably 1 day in 10 years. There's a method of doing that, and I think one of your professors here, Wally Del Mundo, is very familiar, who are students of Wally here. That's a good thesis, by the way, for masters. Updating the probabilistic study for loss of load in Luzon. And currently, with the question of having more intermittent energy sources, is 1 day per year criterion an adequate criterion? Good thesis.
Other questions? Yes, sir.
Sir, I would like to congratulate the presentation. I think it's a realistic presentation of the energy environment, and I think you are somehow kind to the alarmist group because you only showed the social dimension, social cost of carbon. When in fact, if you factor in the social benefit of carbon, I think that the ratio is 1:50. Carbon dioxide is a useful gas, and it is very deceitful and very dishonest to say that carbon dioxide is an evil gas, pollutant gas. It is not. So I would like to congratulate on that. And I think that with regard to COP50, I think that the cracks are already showing. Until 2009, I think there was only one world leader who questioned the UN Al Gore drama of climate alarmism. After 2017, I could count at least 3. Mr. Trump, the Brexiters, and Australia. No? And Turnbull was forced to step back when former Prime Minister Tony Abbott made a big lecture in London, and he cut the CET, the carbon emission target, and it was good. And in even case in Germany, the Greens are losing, and FDP are very explicit to say that abandon all this alarmism. And I think that if you keep showing these numbers, all the drama and alarmism of anti-coal and anti-fossil fuel would later on track. Thank you.
Good point. I think as you said, carbon is not all that bad. If somewhere in the internet you can Google this, there is a NASA study that says the world has become greener there's more foliage in the world. And the reason for that is because we release more carbon dioxide, which the trees transform to more foliage. The world is greener. You can Google that, and if you don't believe me. Sometimes people, because my talks usually involve a lot more share of coal. And my friends call me, "You're the coal boy." And it hurts my wife.
Other questions?
Can I go back to the stranded asset risk? So if what you're saying is true, that MGen will, for example, with respect to the ultra supercritical supercalifragilistic Atimonan plant, if what you say is true, that they will bear all the stranded asset risk, how will the banks dare to finance you?
They took a view that the risk might be very little. Okay. When you allocate the carve-out, you must adopt certain rational criteria. So the thinking is that since Atimonan is the biggest plant in the mix of power plants of Meralco, it will have the biggest haircut. The biggest head will get the biggest haircut. But that would mean that Meralco has only one criterion for a carve-out. But if you are the DU, would you have other reasonable criteria to use?
Prices.
Good, you said it, prices. Why should you cut down your cheapest supply? I will allocate the carve-out disproportionately or inversely proportional to cost. The least cost plant will have the least lower carve-out, and the more expensive plant will have a higher carve-out. And that's just two criteria. There might be a third criteria. The third criteria is I will evaluate the risks associated with the cost of the plant. And the risk includes heat rate, cost of fuel, and the plant that will show me the lowest risk will also have the lowest carve-out. So if I adopt these three criteria, then you can see a situation where it's likely that Atimonan will not get a very big haircut.
Well, I'm inclined to agree with your priest that Atimonan will be the least likely to have take a stranded asset risk. But that risk is still non-zero. If I were the banker, I would not be able to sleep.
Yeah, I cannot speak for them, but
Thank you.
Are there any more? Yes.
For the benefit of the students, maybe students would be interested to hear more about the Lexis software that we were using. Lexus. And what
Lexus.
we can and cannot do. And I guess that's what you use to generate all this spark action.
I anticipated that question. And that's why I brought with me the person who's doing that Plexus. Here is Aaron. He's an alumnus of your school. Aaron, you answered that.
Because you prepared that. So, Plexus is an electricity market software. It's an optimization-based software. So, you can model there yung competition modeling. I think familiar for the economists you can model based on least cost, based on short-run marginal costs, was based on LRMC recovery, and even some other competition models available. Pero basically, it's for the electricity market.
So, let me try to rephrase what Aaron is trying to say. What Aaron is trying to say is the software tries to simulate what's happening in the spot market. So it runs its analysis of dispatching the least cost plants first. And as you need more capacity in the system, it has to make a decision what power plant to add. Is it a coal plant? Is it a gas plant? Is it solar? And it tries to take a look at all these opportunities or cost and see which is the least cost. What is the plant when added to the system will result in the least cost. So it's always a least cost analysis. It also tries to emulate bidding behavior. And where there are tightness of supply, and it looks at the difference or the ratio between offers and demand, it makes some plants offer higher prices to simulate a bidding behavior that if there's tightness in the market, bidders are more likely to bid a higher price than their marginal cost. So this, well, Aaron is a smart boy, so he studied this only for 3 months, I think. But that's the way the software works. In another company, we were using Aurora. It also does the same thing. It looks at 8,760 hours every year for the next 40 years. So that's how big the data requirements. That's how big the data requirement is. And that's a chronological order of simulation. There's another method which is the Lantau Huafu, which tries to first simulate a load duration curve. So it arranges the demand from highest to lowest and breaks it up into small chunks and solves the least cost supply for those small chunks. In the past, MPC used WASP. I forgot now what the acronym stands for. But that was the time.
System planning. Gain automatic system planning.
Yeah, that was the time when we were still using punch cards. So, by the way, I learned my economics using slide rule. That's how Jurassic I am.
Okay, we have time for one more question. Yes.
Hi, sir. I would like to know what is your outlook with the RPS? I'm sorry. I'm G from Abadis Power Corporation.
How do we view RPS? Very good question. Actually, it's in my presentation. So let me see. It's in the annexes. Let's just do that very quickly. I anticipated somebody will ask me that question. See? Here, estimating the cost of RPS compliance. This chart will build the compliance based on this. Here is a percent of renewables over time in our forecast. So you see it dropping from a high of 56%, being stable at about 21% later. Here is a chart of carbon intensity in generation, and as I said, that number is about 721 tons per million kilowatt hours. So now you can go to your math. Tons per gigawatt hour and gigawatt hour here. In 2030, there will be 161 terawatt hours. And it will be 21% share of generation. And at 721 tons per gigawatt hour, you will have 116 million tons of carbon emission. If you are to meet the 35% target, then that means you have to reduce that amount. And that amount is about 16.35 million tons. How much will that cost? You still have the same alternatives, hydro, coal, same costing as before, but it comes down to how much is that how much are you willing to pay in dollars per metric ton of displacing that carbon, You go back to the same chart. And if we are to make 35%, cost of displacement is $25 per metric ton, then that will add another 20 billion pesos into the consumer's bill. That's okay. That's just the consumers paying for it. But remember, this will be on top of the fee. So I think 20 divided by 161, it's about 12.5 centavos per kilowatt hour. What's another 12 centavos if you're already paying 30 centavos per kilowatt hour? Nothing. You can bear that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you all for your questions. With that, we would like to once again thank Mr. Chrysogonus Herrera for his presentation. Let's give him a round of applause. We also thank Meralco PowerGen Corporation for partnering with